Blade Runner 2049.
So Blade Runner 2049 was one of those movies where, as an audience, we either understood the whole purpose of the story and characters understanding what the main character was trying to achieve, or simply the fact that this movie was just another sci-fi genre of a movie. But it was more than that. The movie was not just simply a movie created to earn money or cash grab for the box office, despite it failed at the box office with only 200 million. For this movie, when it once came out, it was simply an artistic style of a movie, a neo-noir, whereas in general audiences prefer movies like the Marvel movies or some paced movie where we were able to take in quickly. No, this movie's potential was used very well and gave this certain way for the actors not to just convey but also tell the story of this movie. Blade Runner 2049 First Impressions. The thing about this movie that I think Percy does well is explaining a certain theme to do with what it's like to be human and the process of change throughout the movie. And this is very well done by putting those two things on the protagonist, Officer K. Now, Officer K, as explained in the beginning text, is one of the new Replicant Nexus models. And we know what replicants are, which is already explained in the first Blade Runner movie. The human beings were artificially made. If they go against the rules and creator, they are hunted down by Blade Runners. And that's what Officer K is, a Blade Runner. However though, there is something different about this one. Officer K isn't just a replicant to our eyes at first. To us, he establishes change and becomes someone who we root for. A hero that at the end, despite everything he goes through, who doesn't matter to us, but at the same time, he does. In the opening scene, there is a parallel and a juxtaposition with the first Blade Runner movie and Blade Runner 2049. In the first Blade Runner, we're introduced in the order of text. In Blade Runner 2049, we see the same as the first one, but this time shown in different order, starting off with the text, the opening of the eye, and then the location with the year shown. We see the reverse of both movies. In the first Blade Runner, the world was represented as a star with the characters overpowered and relegated back to the background. Blade Runner 2049, we see the reverse, humanity first and the world representing the actions. Here we meet Officer K in his spinner vehicle, and this shows the disdain for technology. Instead of the technology used for fixing the flaws or fundamentals created by humans, the humans use it more for their undesired activities and failures. As further highlighted later, K is a demonstration of him being a replicant, is controlled by the police, and that technology being misused. Moving on, we are introduced to Saber Morton, a replicant who has gone rogue, and K's job is to retire that replicant. In the scene, jumping from the vehicle, it shifts to the farmland where Sapir currently lives in, and what we can see is that the native living conditions compared to what the world now is outside, and that is just another sign of how the creator itself is now created, and humanity not matching to the level of technology now, being unable to separate from the old roots.
I hope you don't mind me taking the liberty. I was careful not to drag in any dirt.
I don't mind the dirt. I do mind unannounced visits. You police?
Are you Sapir Morton? Civic number NK68514.
I'm a farmer.
I saw that. What do you farm?
So here we're introduced to Sapir Morton, a replicant who has gone wrong, and Kay's job is to retire him. Now what's interesting about this scene is the conversation and the parallel between Officer K and Sapir Morton.
No, thank you. I prefer to keep an empty stomach until the hard part of the day is done.
No one taking me in. Take a look inside.
This is clearly a situation that's become unpleasant and has become a routine. Officer K having a polite manner that is combined with the implied threat of violence shows a masking of truth in his personal past. Him hunting his own kind may have not been so good in ethical terms, with dilemmas in the past, but the discomfort comes from awareness rather than the guilt and shame. Now you see, a society that functions and requires citizens with a maintained status that has subclass, and that subclass is needed for the replicants, so that to enforce rules and ethics is given to society, and replicants, they use this role to serve and buffer between humanity and morals. There's a contradiction between the ethics and the morality that's became present throughout the history of humanity and still exists while technology progresses, while as human beings we are far behind and lagging.
Feel killing your own kind.
I don't retire my own kind because we don't run.
The response from K shows that he is showing a denial of reality. This echoes as well that the idea of him separating himself from his own fellow replicants as he exterminates them. He's justifying this through the denial of reality, labelling the good and bad replicants based on the act of running. But later on we find out that this is something Officer K is doing, which is running away from oppression, but in a different direction. The irony here is striking with a replicant that is selling his humanity, cornering another replicant that has become more human than human. With the fight happening, it's not stylized in some way, it's sickening and repulsive. With the heavy thoughts and gasping for desperation, it's symbolic for both of them. Sapir knows his worth, he has the desire to live, even when he is about to be ended with life. He is fully aware with life. To experience the freedom you must understand what it's like to be a slave. To be joyful you must experience despair, and to live you must understand and acknowledge that you will die. Sapir has fully become a true human being and stands aggressive in the orders of his creators. Either agree or obey, or simply just retire. The level of intensity and symbolism is very strong, and this is only the beginning. Within Cells Interlinked. One of the fascinating scenes in Blade Runner 2049 is the Within Cells Interlinked scene, where Officer K is tested for any side effects as a replicant. When being tested, the test focuses on K to see if after retiring Sapir Morton from his farmland has experienced any emotional responses. In order to make sure this is true, Officer K has to stay and repeat after what the interviewer says to him.
And dreadfully distinct against the dark, A tall white fountain played.
Cells.
Cells.
Have you ever been in an institution? Cells.
Cells.
Do they keep you in a cell? Cells.
Cells.
When you're not performing your duties, do they keep you in a little box? Cells.
Cells.
Interlinked.
Interlinked.
What's it like to hold the hand of someone you love? Interlinked.
Interlinked.
Do they teach you how to feel finger to finger? Interlinked.
Interlinked.
Do you long for having your heart interlinked? Interlinked.
Interlinked.
Do you dream about being interlinked?
Interlinked.
What's it like to hold your child in your arms? Interlinked.
Interlinked.
Do you feel that there's a part of you that's missing? Interlinked.
Interlinked.
Within cells, interlinked.
Within cells interlinked.
Why don't you say that 3 times? Within cells, interlinked.
Within cells interlinked. Within cells interlinked. Within cells interlinked.
We're done. Constant K. You can pick up your bonus.
Thank you, sir.
The within cells interlinked within one cell baseline test comes from the book Pale or Fire, and it explores a poet who starts to describe his perspective on his near-death experience with life, and then sees a vision of a white fountain, and then later on when he reads the book he finds out that another fellow individual had experienced the same as him and had seen a white fountain in front of him. But how is this connected to the baseline test? Well, the way it connects is to see if K, as mentioned, has suffered from any side effects and changes, because replicants only must stick to one thing, and that is obeying rules only set by the creators and masters. If there is a change in the baseline test, it shows that the replicants have indeed experienced human emotions, the feeling of frustration, sadness and anger, but in this first scene here, it simply shows a demonstration for the character Officer K, a character who is simply following orders of his creators until everything changes. In the Art and Soul book of Blade Runner 2049, Ryan Gosling, the actor who plays Officer K, talks about the baseline test and says, quote, "The baseline test was always a scene to me that held the key to understanding K. I wasn't sure what the key was during the preparation period of the film. In the script, the characters were meant to read a small passage from Pale Fire, but there was no insight as to why. The process is very long and repetitive, but has a trance-inducing effect that can be very powerful and unsettling. I felt like if the technique were extrapolated into K's experience, it could penetrate his physique. I believed we could learn through a process of psychological erosion what his true emotional state was." The search of connection, joy. Since Blade Runner 2049 is about the search of a human connection and what it's like to be a human being, and if so, being a human being, how do we establish and show human emotions? It explores how from Officer K's perspective on the world and how he likes to be in his own fantasy. And this example is showing with holographic AI Joy. Now Joy in the movie plays a big part for Officer K. When we are introduced to her, we just hear a voice greeting Officer K as he enters his home. And then of course the voice is just not only straight away heard, but now shown in front of us. Joy as a hologram and as a character is basically Officer K's canary, and what I mean by that is she is what Officer K needs as a relationship connection, even though she is not real and connected to a ceiling wall. But to backtrack, the question is why Officer K is using Joy as a way to feel emotion and to have a relationship that isn't real. The answer is in front of us when it's revealed that Officer K has designed her the way he wants her to be. This also includes briefly the body type, face type, ethnicity and language. If you made it this far in the video, then you know that this is the part where I am finally going to explain my point. The whole point I've been trying to make from the start and right now. As you know, Blade Runner 2049 is about how do we know if we are human, and how do we establish that with memories that are given to us, and how as an audience we've been following Officer K on his journey to understand what it's like to be human. And now this is the part where I'm able to speak about it. So after stumbling across a memory in the orphanage, Officer K goes back to his apartment and speaks to Joy, the only connection he has about his memory, and he tries to figure out if the memory is an implant or it's real.
I always told you, you're
Stop. How do I know if a memory is an implant or not?
Makes the memories.
So Officer Case decides to visit Anna Sterling, a memory maker, to find out if his memory is real or is an implant. And Anna Sterling is basically the example and reflection of what Kay is, the existence of his life. And that life of Anna is behind a glass that has an immune system of resulting to have freedom as long as it's used to serve purpose like Officer K does. The conversation goes like this.
What makes your memory so authentic?
Well, there's a bit of every artist in their work. But I was locked in a sterile chamber at 8, so if I wanted to see the world, I had to imagine it.
The interaction between these two characters somehow becomes a character study on the parental role, with the potential of the creator and consequence of a tyrant, which is becoming the received flaws and problems from the parents that are dysfunctional, which shows the replicant struggling in terms of identity. And here comes one of the greatest scenes where we see the perspective of Kay in his out. After this scene here where Anna Sterling asks Kay to sit so she can demonstrate if a memory is real, we see Anna analysing Kay while he sits, and you can see both parallels of the characters, with Anna inside the glass and Kay outside as they both start reacting. We do not see what there is from the perspective of the memory, but somehow the strong focus is that they're in both investing emotions,
Anna's face is shown with the emotion of streaming tears after looking at the memory, and as for Kay, him hoping for the idea that he may be the child because of the memory he had as a child felt like it was him, and then realising that the memory was never his but Anna's memory, and that exact moment of realising that the memory isn't his, after holding back a lot of emotions, Officer K shows the outburst of his emotions as a replicant for the first time as he steps out of the facility into the snow. Revisiting the baseline test. Okay, so to backtrack and revisit a scene I previously spoke about in the video, after Officer K steps out of the facility after finding out that he is indeed not the person with memories Anna Sterling is, this then reconnects with the within cells interlinked baseline test once again.
Cells.
Cells.
Have you ever been in an institution? Cells.
Cells.
When you're not performing your duties, do they keep you in a little box? Cells.
Cells.
Interlinked.
Interlinked.
What's it like to hold the hand of someone you love? Interlinked.
Interlinked.
Within cells interlinked.
Within cells interlinked.
Dreadfully.
Dreadfully.
What's it like to be filled with dread? Dreadfully.
Dreadfully.
Do you like being separated from other people? Distinct.
Distinct.
Dreadfully distinct.
Dreadfully distinct.
Dark.
Dark.
Within cells interlinked.
Within cells interlinked.
Within one stem.
Within one stem.
And dreadfully distinct.
And dreadfully distinct.
Against the dark.
Against the
A
dark.
tall white fountain played.
A tall white fountain played.
You're not even close to baseline.
To compare both the baseline tests between before and now, you can see the differences side by side.
Cells.
Cells.
Have you ever been in an institution? Cells.
Cells.
Do they keep you in a cell? Cells.
Cells.
When you're not performing your duties, do they keep you in a little box? Cells.
Cells.
Interlinked.
Interlinked.
What's it like to hold the hand of someone you love? Interlinked.
Interlinked.
Do they teach you how to feel finger to finger? Interlinked.
Interlinked.
Do you long for having your heart interlinked? Interlinked.
Interlinked.
Do you dream about being interlinked?
Interlinked.
What's it like to hold your child in your arms? Interlinked.
Interlinked.
Do you feel that there's a part of you that's missing? Interlinked.
Interlinked.
Within cells interlinked.
Within cells interlinked.
Why don't you say that 3 times? Within cells interlinked.
Within cells interlinked. Within cells interlinked. Within cells interlinked.
He's back at the station for the baseline test. This is where Officer K changes in the parts of the human way and as a replicant, as he for the first time had experienced emotion. Previously mentioned, baseline tests check if a replicant has changed in terms of emotion, and it shows that K has truly changed after the outburst he had experienced. K has stepped up his boundaries and has stepped beyond the creator. He is not alive as a soul anymore after everything so far he has gone through. Him believing that he may be the child of the human replicant, only to find out that he is simply someone who only existed to share a memory. The final scene. After everything Officer K has been through, from being a replicant with empty emotion to feeling that he may have purpose, and then only realising that purpose was nothing but an addition to his life, Officer K does one last thing, to do something that is the most human way possible, and that is saving a life by dying for the right cause, and reuniting a relationship that was hidden and gone for so long. He is given a choice to kill, but instead of killing, he chooses to save, and by choosing save, the words of St. Martin repeat once again, "You've never seen a miracle." Despite to others, he had no meaning. He chooses to become human, and by becoming human, he truly has changed throughout the journey we as an audience have followed him on. And at the end, he changes and dies, and not through the life as a replicant, but this time as human. He speaks to Deckard one last time in the final moments before his arc ends, which is the
just a moment. Beautiful, isn't it?
Kay, as true to his character, has never shared his innermost feelings. He has gone through a lot. He lost someone who was the only connection to him. He reunited a family, but in sacrificing so much throughout his journey, he stood for something. He became human in the most human way possible and experienced what it's like to live as he sits and bleeds in the snow. So that was the explanation for Blade Runner 2049 on what it's like to be human and how do we establish human change at the end. Overall, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to click the like button and comment what you thought about the video.